Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Ffinlo Costain. The Environment Bank has secured conservation covenants for 8 new biodiversity net gain habitat banks. I spoke to Emma Toovey, Chief Ecology Officer at the Environment Bank, and I asked her to tell me more about what the Environment Bank is and what it does.
Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me on the show today. So Environment Bank, firstly, they're not a financial bank. We're actually a bank of natural capital. So we're a provider of biodiversity net gain units for the development sector. But basically what that means is that we work with rural landowners and rural managers across England, and we delivered landscape scale nature recovery projects, which are basically nature reserves. And in doing so, we take low value land for nature and we put these incredible nature recovery projects together, deliver a great mosaic of habitats, and that increases the biodiversity value of the land. And what we're able to do is measure that uplift, and then we can translate that into what are called biodiversity units, which are a new asset class, and they can be purchased by developers to meet their new requirements under a new legislation that came in February called biodiversity net gain.
What's the geographical spread of the biodiversity units that are managed by the bank? You mentioned that it's England, but is it right across England? And then what sort of habitats are you securing?
Yeah, so we have 25 live and secured sites at the moment, with another 20-ish in the pipeline. We call those habitat banks, and they're currently all across England, as you say, all the way from Northumberland in the north right down to mid-Devon. And we've actually got a really nice spread of sites across the country. So in terms of the habitats, each of these projects is really designed to meet local nature recovery objectives and deliver the most appropriate habitats basically for that local context and also what's right for the land. So typically this always includes a real mix of habitats. We don't just stick with one. We go for species-rich grassland. We do enhancements and creation of broadleaf woodland, great mosaics of scrub and wetlands, including ponds, reed beds, even some fens. And we do enhancement works to ditches and river networks as well. You name it, we're involved in it. But we typically use traditional kind of agricultural practices to manage the land. So your hay cuts, conservation grazing, and that maintains the agricultural use of the land as well as sort of delivering the best outcomes for nature.
When you say habitat bank, I take it that includes a number of biodiversity units within each bank.
Yes, that's right. So what we do is we forward fund these projects. We deliver the incredible sort of enhancements on the ground, and that creates this uplift in value that we can then bank. And it could be hundreds of units from one site, and those are then sold to multiple different developers to meet their planning requirements.
How do you identify potential new habitat bank sites?
So we do a lot of engagement work and sort of raising the profile of the business, but typically landowners come to us. So we're always looking for opportunities to work with new landowners across the country and really to support the diversification of the rural economy. In the main, landowners that are thinking about that diversification and they have a real appetite for doing something for nature on their land, and they register an interest with us just through our website. And then all the potential projects then go through a bit of an onboarding assessment process. So we have a big team of experts in-house. We have land agents, chartered surveyors, a big team of ecologists like myself, lawyers, and they go through that sort of assessment process to check the suitability and viability of the project to deliver great outcomes for nature, as well as being compliant with the new legislation.
And who is it that then invests in biodiversity units in the UK?
The units are purchased by the development sector, and they're developers that are basically delivering new development schemes across the country. And this is a requirement that's brand new for developers under this new law that came in February, biodiversity net gain. So the Environment Act actually was given royal assent in 2021. And was mandated in February, and this requires developers to deliver at least a 10% net gain in biodiversity value as a result of their scheme. So they can do this on site within the red line of the scheme, but often that's not possible, so they need to look for off-site options. So they can do it themselves or indeed buy units from habitat banks like ourselves.
As well as developers, are there also investment companies investing in habitat banks?
Yeah, so we are backed by Gresham House, our investors, and that funding is used to forward fund these projects. So we're not reliant on the sale of units from a developer to kick these projects off and get them off the ground, which means we can start creating and enhancing habitats right now at a landscape scale. But then we can sell those units to developers to essentially recoup that funding and return and make a return for our investors as well. But the regulations have really transformed the potential for nature markets to be economically viable. They've obviously created a demand for and a consumer of biodiversity units, which is a brand new thing. And yes, of course, there's certainly a capital outlay and long-term management cost for landowners and land managers like ourselves. And through our model, Gresham are able to forward fund and therefore manage that financial risk for the landowners themselves. But then we're able to sell to developers and command a fair price in the market, channeling that private investment into nature recovery.
I wanted to ask you about how biodiversity makes money, but I think you partly explained that. For example, with Gresham House investing in a habitat bank, which you then sell on as biodiversity units at a market rate to ensure that return on the original investment.
Indeed, yeah. So there's a margin on that, but actually there's a lot of costs built into the price of a biodiversity unit, which on average across the market at the moment is around the 25 grand per unit. In that, it needs to cover the long-term management costs of a unit. It needs to cover all the capital costs. There's quite a lot of legal costs as well as ongoing monitoring and any remediation works that you might need to do to ensure that the habitats are as you've promised them to be. And then there will be a level of margin on top of that, which makes it profitable for investors.
And just finally, you've announced 8 new habitat bank sites today. What's significant about those?
Yeah, so it's really exciting. So there's lots of firsts here at a really crucial point in such a nascent market. So there are brand new regulations only going live in February, as I've already said, and these 8 sites have secured 8 brand new conservation covenants, which in itself is also a brand new legal instrument defined by the Environment Act. And these secure land for nature conservation purposes in England. And we've done that working in partnership with RSK Wilding, which is also a first because they're one of the very first responsible bodies that's been given that status in England by the government. So these are their very first conservation covenants too. It's a real milestone for BNG, for the BNG regime as a whole, really, as it shifts the dial on market supply, and it really nearly doubles the supply of units in the market overnight. So exciting times for us.
That was Emma Toovey from the Environment Bank. More news as ever on our website 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.